Hello everybody, how's it going? My name is McDude. Welcome back to another Blitzkrieg 2 map editor tutorial. So today I want to cover a couple of topics that I've seen based off of a couple of comments. One was asking about how do you make objectives. A second one was how do you make endless counterattacks. So in this tutorial I'm going to teach you how to make objectives, as well as how do you make scripted reinforcements. So let's go ahead and start off by opening our editor, setting up a new map for ourselves. Alright, then once you have a few things set up, let's begin. So I want to start off by talking about objectives, because these are the most important things that you normally see in a single player mission. Objectives are basically the checklist of things you need to do. So these can range from, some common examples include having a unit move to a specific position, destroying enemy units, and capping a key building. So, in order to set up these kinds of objectives, let's go ahead and, under our missions properties, scroll down until you find objectives. To add an objective, just right-click on Objectives and click on Add. So I'm only going to make 3 objectives, so you can get an idea of how the most common objectives work. So, under Value, click New, and we will be making a specific file here. Now, this here in question, I would like you to use this as a bit of good practice. Depending on the objective, what I recommend you do is have the file name be based on what you want to do for that objective. So, in this case, I want to go ahead and have the unit move to an area for my first objective. So, this one, I'll put move to area. Now we'll go ahead and edit it. Now, there are 5 different properties here. There are only 3 that we are going to worry about in this video. So we're going to look at header file ref. This is the objective name. Description file ref, which is the more detailed description of your objective. And map positions. These will be little green arrows that float up and down over the map. These are also shown on the minimap as a pink arrow. So let's go ahead and start working on making the header, description, and adding a map position. So my header, I'm going to go ahead and call this one move to the corner. Of course, when you're making a more formal mission than this, you'll probably come up with something a little bit more specific than what I'm going to be making here. And I'll save it. And the description, I'm going to put move to the corner of the map indicated by the arrow. Alright, and this is where map positions comes into play. So, of course, in order to make one, just right-click on map positions and click on add. You can have as many map positions as you want. You can have none, 1, or however many you want. So, we are given X and Y when we add a map position. These are particular map coordinates that we need to pay attention to. So, Where do we find these coordinates, you ask? Well, it's relatively simple. If you have the Objectives tab open here and Objects tab open, you may not have noticed this when you were moving your mouse around on the map, but over on the bottom right, you can see that there are 4 different numbers that end up changing. And the numbers that we need on the bottom right are the first 2, which are our x and y coordinates. So let's go ahead and have a bit of an example coordinate here. So let's go ahead and do 545 for x, and then 4605 for y. So 545 and 4605. If you end up forgetting a certain position, you can just write down one coordinate and then put down a completely different one that's close to the original x position. And then click OK. And that is basically the first objective set up. Alright, now, before I work on the other 2, in order to actually make our objective work, we need to make a script. So let's go ahead to script file reference, create a new script, and we will go ahead and start off by making a function for our objective. So I will also put a start thread on it as well. So how this works is we use 3 specific commands to handle objectives. We use give objective, complete objective, and fail objective. So the 3 commands here will do the following. Give objective will give the player a notification saying objective received and then the objective name. It will also show the map positions that we have specified. Complete objective will get rid of the map positions and indicate a green check mark in the tick box. If we use fail objective, it works the same way as complete objective, but it will give us a red X instead. So for now, let's put these 2 in a comment. Now, what I like to do is when it comes to making objectives, I like to give the player a bit of time just to load into the map. So I'm going to go ahead and add the wait command. And I'm just going to set mine for 3 seconds. Wait will wait for a specified amount of seconds to pass before continuing to run extra lines of code. So give objective. Which objective do we want to give? Well, if we look over at the bottom left, where we made our objectives, we can see 0, 1, and 2, which are the IDs of the objectives. For now, I only want to give out objective 0. So let's go ahead and give the player objective 0. So what we're doing now is we're going to be constantly checking to see if a player has some kind of unit from their own in a specific area. So how do we do this? Well, we start off by making something called a loop. And it starts with while. And usually a type of condition would be used here, but I'm going to use 1. And then we put do, and then we need something to end it, of course. So a while loop, what it does is it will run lines of code inside here while a condition is being met. If a condition is not met, it will continue running through the rest of the code. If it is met, it will continue running this. Some of the criterias that you can choose to make a loop run forever is just the number 1, and sometimes the true word. So this essentially means with 1, it will run forever. Same thing with true. However, we don't want to have our loop run completely forever. So eventually, we will have to use the break command, which will X out of the current loop that you are in. I will put that in a bit later. So now we need to make sure that we need a bit of a cooldown to make sure that Blitzkrieg 2 can handle checking objectives perfectly fine. Or at least making sure that what we do in our script makes sure that we're able to complete the objective. So I'm going to be using a sleep command. So sleep is a different type of wait. However, sleep, you can use it to wait for a certain amount of seconds. If you set it as 20, it will equal 1 second. For sleep, when it comes to checking something, I usually like to put a number that's 7 or higher. Usually, if you use anything lower than 7, it will have a chance of freezing your game, causing it to soft lock, meaning you'll have to open up the task manager and then abort the game. So I recommend when you set up your endless loop, make sure you have a sleep command first. Alright, now next is where we can get to an if command, or an if statement. So an if is similar to a loop. All it does is just make sure it checks a specific criteria, and then if it does meet the criteria specified, it will run the code in that, and then it will X out once it's done. So for my first objective, I said that I wanted to have a unit move to a specific area. And to do that, we need to do the following command, is some unit in area. What this does is that it checks if a unit from a specific player ID is in a specific zone. And optionally, you can count planes. So we need to specify the player. So I'm going to check if I am in the zone, so I'm going to set it as 0. The script area name, which I have not made yet, but to make it simple, I'm going to just call it zone. And then count as planes. If you set it to 0, it will only count ground units. If you set it as 1, it will actually count planes and ground units. For now, I'm only going to set it to 0. We also need to make sure that this equals a specific number, and we need it to equal 1. So the double equal sign here makes sure that it checks if it's exactly this. So if some unit in area from my units, if there are any in the script area called zone, and it must be a ground unit, guaranteed. If it is true, then we will execute some lines of code. And here, we can go ahead and use our complete objective right here. So I'm going to just copy and paste it. And I will go ahead and say complete objective 0. And just to make sure that I don't have this running constantly in the background, I'm going to use the break command. So let's go ahead and save our script. And I am going to make sure that I make our script area real quick. So I'll go into script. And I'll make the area called zone, as I specified in the script. And I also need a unit of mine to go there. So for the sake of this tutorial, let's go ahead and use, why not, an IS3. Okay, so now we can go ahead and launch Blitzkrieg 2. To see if our objective works. Alright, so load up your map. Alright, so we got our unit, and we were given our objective. So objective received, move to the corner. So that is the header file reference. And then if we click on here, it will take us over to the map position that we specified over here. And here is our description. Move to the corner of the map indicated by the arrow. So we're off to a good start. So let's go ahead and take our IS3 and move him to the corner of the map. So once he arrives at the designated area, the objective will end up being complete. And bingo! Our first objective is complete. And if we go to our objective list, we can see here that move to the corner has been completed. So just to get a bit of an idea of what happens when you use fail objective instead of complete objective, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the script and launch the game again to show you how that works. So we'll open up our map again. So we were given our objective, so let's go ahead and move to the zone. And as you can see here, objective failed, move to the corner. And it gives us a red X instead. Okay. So we're off to a good start. So let's go ahead and start working on our next objective. And that is to destroy some enemy units. So for my next objective, I'm going to go ahead and indicate this one as destroy units. And I'm going to be doing a very similar thing as I did for objective 1. So we'll go in here. I'll make my header. So this one will be destroy enemy units. Save that. And then the description will be destroy the enemy tanks located on the minimap. Or map in general. And we will add a map position. And let's go ahead and put one, say, let's do 4530 for both of these. Makes it pretty simple. Click OK. Now, in order to make sure that we can check this, we need to make sure that we spawn in the units in question. So I'm going to go and spawn in German tanks. Let's go ahead and spawn in... You don't see this very often, but I'm going to go ahead and spawn in some Panzer 38Ts. I'll spawn in 3 of them. So, and I will quickly make all of them face in the direction where the IS-3 will be coming from. And I'm going to select all of these, go to the unit's properties, and set the script ID to 0. There is one little mix-up I ended up doing as well, because if you were paying attention, I was still placing down units under player 0, when I actually wanted to put down enemy units. So under the unit's properties, while they're still selected, set the player to 1. Okay, now we'll go back to the mission's properties, and we will head back to our script. So I'm going to change this back to complete objective. And now I'm going to work on the next objective. So I'm going to go ahead and put objective 1. And over here, after I complete the objective here, after I complete this, what I want to do is I want to work on this one next. So I'm going to go ahead and after complete objective, call that function. So I'm going to put obj1 and then the 2 brackets after it, just so I know that I am calling the function. So this is basically going to be very similar to what I did in objective 0. But I'm going to go ahead and wait for 2 seconds instead. I'm going to give objective 1 this time. And while 1 do, so this will be our endless check, sleep for 7. Now the next one we're going to do for an if is we are going to do is somebody alive. Now this one will check if a certain player has a certain unit alive based on a given script ID. So with this one, I want to go ahead and say if an enemy with script ID 0, if it does not exist, which means equals equals 0, then. So player 1, which is my enemy, and all my units were assigned as the script ID 0. And I am making sure that there are no enemies with script ID 0 alive. And then once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and complete objective 1. And of course, break from the loop. Now we will save this, and we will launch Blitzkrieg 2 once again. Go back to our map, open it up. So we'll go ahead and get our IS-3 to move over to the zone. Speed this up a bit. So we completed the objective, and we received our new objective, destroy enemy units. And we also have our newly indicated map position. Destroy the enemy tank located on the minimap. I'm missing an S. Okay, so now let's go ahead and have our IS-3 swarm to position and obliterate the Panzer 38Ts, the poor tanks that have no love in this game. I am terribly sorry. What? You're kidding. Okay, well, and we have completed destroy enemy units. You know, I didn't think Panzer 38Ts were gonna actually resist shots from an IS-3. Okay, well, I think it's safe to say we can head back to the editor and work on the final objective, which is to capture a zone or a base. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I select player 1 this time. And I'm going to go and get a building. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and just put down a radar. And then I am going to put down a flag. So while the flag you may put down will be incorrect, it will eventually just correct itself later on when you end up going ahead and putting it for the specific player ID. So while this one is just a red flag, it eventually will correct to the German flag if you saw what I ended up specifying earlier. So I'm going to make sure that I set up the script ID for my building. I'm going to set the script ID in question to 10. You may also end up doing it to the flag as well. But now, I think at this point, I can start linking the two together. So the link ID for the radar is 5, and the link ID for the flag is 6. So I want the flag to be linked with the building, so I'm going to put link with as the number 5. And then, of course, for good measure, just in case, go ahead to the player bonus objects over in the missions properties again, and go ahead and just add one for each player, and make sure the link ID is set to the building. Okay, so I will save that. Alright, now, while we're still in our missions properties, we actually need to create the objective. So this one, I'm going to just call Capture Radar. So, over here, I'm going to go ahead and define the header. So we want to go ahead, capture the radar, and save. And the description, capture the enemy radar located on the map. Now this time I'm not going to use map positions because, like I said, these can be completely optional. So I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and head back to the script. Here it is. And then I'm going to basically do the same thing as I did earlier. Basically, more or less, this is going to be a copy-paste of Objective 1. However, I'm just going to make some changes real quick. So, with OBJ1, Objective 1, I'm going to put the next one, OBJ2. Give Objective 2. Now this one, I'm going to check if I own it. So if player 0, which is me, if I own the building, which is script ID 10, and I want to make sure it's true, so change the 0 to a 1, then go ahead and put complete Objective 2, and make sure it does break. So I'll hit OK, save the script. I will save the map. Now we will launch the game again. We'll head back to our map. And as you can see, our key building was set up correctly. So I'm going to give my IS-3 a bit of a action key here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make him move here, then assign him to swarm to the enemy Panzer 38Ts, and then have him move to the base. So I'm going to go ahead, hold left shift. I'm going to right click on the zone, click on here, swarm to here, and then X out of that, and then move, right click on here so I can see, and then click here, and X. So currently I'm making him move over to this zone here. It is done. Now he is swarming to destroy the Panzer 38s. And there's one more. And we've got our capture the radar. Capture the enemy radar located on the map. And it is now starting to move over to the radar. I will speed this up. And we have captured this. But, okay, why is it not completing the objective? Well, that is because sometimes Blitzkrieg 2's scripting is a little wonky. So, before we end up doing a script check, let's make sure that everything is set up correctly. So I'm going to go to the object's properties. Wrong one. So I'm going to unlink this real quick. So we don't have a script ID set up for the flag, but we do have one set up for the radar. So let's double check. Did I put the script correctly to indicate the unit? Player 0. Okay, well, you know what? Let's kind of change this up. Let's have it if player ID 1 does not own it. And what I will do is I will have both the flag and the building have the same script ID, just in case. And I will link the flag back to the key building. So now we will save and launch Blitzkrieg 2. So go back here. So yes, I want you to make sure when it comes to making a script, keep in mind what's going on in the script, because if something does not look like it's working correctly, make sure that you look around the mission, check your units, check the script, and see if everything was recorded correctly.
Броневойска. Живей, новый приказ. Сейчас выполнен.
So I'll do the whole action queue thing again.
Сейчас выполнен.
So move to the zone.
Вижу врага. Готовлюсь к стрельбе. Цель сорвана.
So that's one tank down. There's another one. Imagine doing a multiplayer game and just end up seeing that Panzer 38T just still alive. If you ran into such a stupid situation like this, that'd be kind of funny. Okay, let's make our way to the radar. Alright, does it work now? And there we go. So, as you can see, we have managed to complete all 3 objectives. Okay. So now, I'm going to go ahead and start explaining scripted reinforcements. Okay, so scripted reinforcements are pretty similar to how you would call a manual reinforcement. So let's go back to our mission's properties first. And under us, we need a reinforcement point first. So let's go to gameplay, reinforcement points, and let's add one real quick. So I'm going to show you how to spawn in the ground units and also how to spawn in the air units and kind of how get them a little set up. Deploy template, yes, let me make sure I do that. A common deploy template would be a good idea. Okay. So, now that we've got our reinforcement point, we can set is default to true if we want, or we can leave it as false. Because when you call a script ID reinforcement, or a scripted reinforcement, it does not use a reinforcement call, nor does it matter about if is default is set to true or false. Okay, so let's go to script reinforcements text ID for player 0, which is me. So I'm going to add a reinforcement, so I'm going to right click and click on add. I'm going to add 2 for this. So you'll see reinforcement, which will consist of a file that you need to create, and then the name. So the name, I'm going to go ahead and call this one ground. And the next one, I'm going to call air. Okay. So let's set up a reinforcement. So I'm going to go ahead for the reinforcement, for the ground reinforcement in particular, I'm just going to call the file name ground. And I'm going to go ahead and spawn in, let's do some light AA in question. Specifically, the ones that you're able to use vehicles to tow them. So I'm going to find my artillery that I want to use. 37 mil 61K looks about right. So I will have that being towed. I'll set the link index as 0. And then because I want the truck to tow it, I'm going to have the link index set as 1. And the artillery will be getting towed by it. So I'm going to link the artillery to the truck. So I'll select our truck. And then now I want to set this up. So we need to go back to our script. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to make another function for this. But to show you how this works, I want to go ahead and I'm going to wait for 5 seconds. And then I'm going to call a specific command here called land reinforcement from map. Now, there are 4 different things that you need to enter here. You need to first enter the player, specifically the one who is going to be having the reinforcement get called, the text ID of the reinforcement, in which I called ground as the first one. The next one is the reinforcement point, which I am going to set as 0. And the next one is the script ID, which I'm going to go ahead and give this one 73. You can put -1 if you don't want to use a script ID. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the unit move to the specific zone that we defined earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and use cmd act_move. So we need the script ID, so that would be 73. Dispersion, I'm just going to set as 0. And then our zone indicated from above. So once our truck spawns in with our light AA being towed, it should head to the zone. Okay, well, what about when it comes to aircraft then? I'm going to go ahead and put a sleep on this one here. I'm going to have it sleep for 13 segments. And then I'm going to use the same command, land reinforcement from map, 0, and I called the reinforcement air, spawn it from point to 0, and then I'll just give it the script ID of 37. And then cmd act_swarm. Yeah, I think it'd be a better idea if I had a bit of extra dispersion, so I'll just put 100 on here. Okay. So I will save the script. And let's make sure I actually create a air reinforcement here. So let's get a file set up. So we'll call it air. And with this one, I'm going to go ahead and spawn in, let's go with fighters. And I will call 2 fighters. So let's go ahead and let's call the ice 16. And you know what? Maybe a yak 1 for good measure. Now let's save. And let me just make sure that you're following me here on the script. So at this point, you should have learned how to set up an objective and assign it to the player from the function I created. And then how you end up making something that will endlessly check if something is true. Then eventually get to the function called to start the next objective. And then here for landing reinforcement on the map. So let's launch Blitzkrieg 2 one last time.
Экипаж танка, прием.
So, at this point, you know the
Живее,
deal.
новый приказ. Да, уже.
I will just speed things up.
Дислоцировались.
Alright, so we've completed our objective. Now pretty soon we should see our units spawn in.
Орудие ПВО в вашем распоряжении.
Alright. So we have our Studebaker get called in successfully. And it's also managed to call in our fighters. And they're both heading towards the designated area.
Земля, я слушаю.
Wonderful.
Куда велели, туда и приехали.
Alright. So now at this point, you have learned how to make objectives and how to create scripted reinforcements. So, without further ado, it's time to wrap things up here. So, thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. If you did enjoy it and find it helpful, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you did not find this helpful, go ahead and just give it a thumbs down. I will put the previous tutorial I ended up making over on the right, and the playlist of all my Blitzkrieg 2 tutorials, as well as some that I got help from others on, over on the left. So, without further ado, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.